Hello, and welcome to episode 17 of the Time to Calibrate podcast. I'm Mark Levesque. Bob Alaboy joins me from the Time to Go Travel and Timepieces YouTube channel, Brent Robillard from the Calibrated Wrist, and we have a special guest host, Jason Hutton from ZENEA Watches and Timepiece Shows. How are you today, gentlemen?
Very good. How's it going?
Excellent, man.
Excellent. Thanks for having me, folks.
Great to have you. So let's get the wrist checks out of the way. Jason, since you're the guest today, how about you go first?
I decided to put on one of my favorite watches. I picked it up last year. It's a ZENEA Il Primero skeletonized titanium piece. I love it. I don't wear it as much because it's a little bit large for my wrist, but I quite like it. So just enjoying that today. So,
oh, looking good.
Thank you.
What about you, Bob?
Today I am wearing the Aquafort from Venezianico. This came in just last week. And it's pretty cool. It's fully engraved bezel, the lugs, the case back. It's a process where they not really engrave, they etch it with acid and then fill the etchings with a black ink. So it has a cool little contrast to it. And yeah, it's an awesome watch.
What about you, Brent?
Well, as you guys can see here, I have the hand heart on this morning. I have 3 different hand hearts in the studio right now. This one is the 417 ES 1954 chronograph, and it's phenomenal. Like I've never had hands on with hand heart before. I've been sort of somebody who, admired them from afar, but every single one that's in here right now is just surpassing expectation. Really, really like this one. I've got it on their bun strap, which is not normally something I would wear, but man, I think it's cool.
Yeah, that's quite the choice there, the bun strap.
Yeah, I had the opportunity to meet them in Prague in December. They are such a great group of people. And I agree with you, Brent. Their watches are absolutely phenomenal in hand.
Yeah, it's been actually Felix that I've been dealing with, and he seems like a wonderful guy. I can't wait to meet him in Vancouver, actually.
Should be great.
Cool. Well, I've got my new watch from yesterday. I got an IWC Aqua Timer. The silver dialed version with the inner rotating bezel that rotates from the outside. This is my 4th Aqua Timer. I had gotten the original titanium GST back in the early 2000s. And then I got a white dialed version with the outer rotating with the sapphire bezel. I got a black dialed version with the yellow accents, and now this one. IWC makes an incredible watch. They're just so solid. But I'll have to admit one thing, though. It's been a while since I've had a watch this size and this heavy. It's going to take a little getting used to. And I also got another watch yesterday, just incidentally. Anders & Company sent me one of their little chronographs based off of a 1930s, 1940s design. It's quartz. It's got a salmon dial, and I'm very impressed. I mean, the case shape, the way the lugs are. Go check out my Instagram page. I posted a couple of pictures already. And I had an old straight end link Jubilee Gekoda bracelet lying around. And I just think I mean, we don't have video, but you guys can see. It works. I mean, it just looks really cool. It's very comfortable, very light. You couldn't find a bigger contrast to the IWC as far as design and weight and feel. So we decided to have a hostful podcast. We haven't done one in a while, since probably the holidays, just to get in touch with each other, talk about what we think of our show. How are we doing, and where are we going, and what do you guys think? How's the show going with you guys? Get any feedback?
I'm loving it so far. We've had amazing guests on. Actually, a lot of people may not realize, but Mark has been putting in some overtime hours getting some of these people on and coming through with some really interesting guests. We just had RJ on the other day. We do usually stick to an hour. We're all quite busy, and he's one guy, and quite a few of the others I wish we would have had some more time with, to be honest with you. But yeah, so far it's been excellent.
Yeah, it's just so that the listeners understand, and then maybe they would know that this is happening anyway. But we kind of have this little chat group, and Mark's constantly saying, "Hey, I just reached out to so and so, and he's more than willing to come on the podcast." And it's just like a surprise after surprise. It's been fantastic.
Yeah.
It's been a lot of fun, and we've done pretty well with them. I'm pretty sure that if everyone wanted RJ or Andrew or anybody else to come back, they'd be willing to come back. And RJ kept a story from us that he told us off air that we wish we should have had in the show. So he's going to have to come back and tell that story because it's a doozy.
Yeah, that sounds pretty juicy, whatever.
It was.
I'll have to get spill the tea later, Bob.
Yeah, Bob will tell you later. What do you think, Jason? How are we doing?
You know, I haven't had the opportunity to listen to every single episode, but
that's it. You're gone. You're out of the show now.
Oh no, I've actually listened to about 2/3 of them, which is pretty good, and at least my opinion. But you guys are doing a great job. I agree with you. You've had a phenomenal breadth of guests. I think the dialogue and the dynamic between the three of you is really good. I think you're doing an incredible job. You know, well done in terms of guests and just what you're creating. I think you're creating a great following, and I can't wait to see what the future holds throughout the rest of 2025 and beyond.
Yeah, we're having a lot of fun with it. I think that it's progressing. We're getting more and more comfortable on yeah, well, I'm just going to say camera, but on mic. I think that the guests, we're getting better and better at interviewing them. We're doing quite a bit of research and preparation every single time. So it shows, I believe, in the product that we're putting together, and I hope everybody's enjoying it too.
Yeah, you folks have some great questions when you have the guests on and really kind of getting into, you know, the deeper depths of their experience and what their involvement is within the timepiece industry, and just incredible insights. And you do a great job in, I think, making the guests feel comfortable and really having them share very openly and very authentically about their experiences, which is what you want out of a podcast.
Yeah, we're trying to ask the questions that others aren't asking. I mean, how many times has Ariel Adam been asked, tell me how you started your podcast? It's or your blog for that matter. We try to go a little outside the box and do a research and due diligence.
Yeah, I really enjoyed that podcast with Ariel, actually. And I felt you folks he kind of got into a lot of depth about who he was as a person, and really a much better understanding of some of his motivations and how he approaches a lot of his life. And I found it very interesting to listen to. So well done on that.
I have to admit, when we were talking to him, a couple of times he answered some questions, and Brent and I were looking at each other with like big saucer eyes, like, wow. Yeah, it was great.
That's perfect.
So, guys, what projects you guys working on lately?
So for me, the big thing that's coming up, I have a bunch of the usual sort of watches in for video and for photography for Instagram. But the big thing that's happening a week from today, actually, Jason and I are going to be going to the British Watchmakers Day show. There's a whole bunch of shows surrounding it with Worn and Wound and Time and Tide, a few different things. So that's really exciting. I actually fly in a day ahead of Jason, and I'm heading straight for the most heavy metal sounding town name there is, Maidenhead. And getting a full tour of this Christopher Ward headquarters. So I'm going to put together some video on that. And that's just going to be a weekend of all about watches. It's going to be a lot of fun. So that's the big one that's coming up for me.
Very cool. Brent, what are you up to?
Well, like at the Calibrated Wrist, I think what we've tried to do this year is focus on growth. That's our number one goal. So our YouTube channel just passed 1,000 followers, and although that's not Bob Allaby territory, it's pretty good for us. And we're going to invest significant time there, probably. Caroline has taken over all of those video making duties, and that's allowed me to focus on other things. We've also increased our stable of writers and photographers. We've added people like the illustrious Mark Levesque. But we've also added Stephen Nichols from Talking About Time, Vincent Deschamps from Mainspring Watch. And, we've brought on Trevor Dent from EDC Knife and Tool, and he's going to do some gear stuff. And Dan Mann, whom we've had on as a guest host from the Dansome, he's going to do some lifestyle content for us. So we're pretty happy about that. But probably the biggest project we have on the go right now is the print magazine. It's also called the Calibrated Wrist, and all three of you guys are involved in some way. Bob, you're doing some picks for us. Mark, you've got an article in there, and Jason, we're launching at the Vancouver Timepiece Show. So it's going to be a semi-annual publication that kind of coincides with like a spring-summer version in Vancouver, and then a fall-winter version in Toronto. And we have surprisingly had an enormous response from brands to date. We've got more than 20 that jumped in right away. Things like like Longines, Oris, Fortis, Rado. We've got some sort of independents like Nevada Gretchen and Hanhart and Elliott Brown. And we've even got micro brands who are involved in it, like Visitor and Camp and Trask and Canopy. There's really too many, I guess, to list entirely. So we're really happy about that. We've even got watch adjacent content, such as, golf, artisanal jewelry making, and some EDC stuff also going in there with Giant Mouse. So very, very excited. And I think more importantly, our kind of approach to this is very unconventional. It's not going to be available on the newsstands. It's not going to be purchasable online, for example. You're going to have to be there. You're going to have to be at the shows. You're going to have to be at the Red Bar events, at the Watch Club events, and things like that in order to get your hands on it, which means that it's going to be distributed directly to enthusiasts. So like many years ago, Caroline and I published another magazine. It was a literary journal from 1997 to 2001, and we used to distribute it nationally. And it was always so disheartening when they came back, the unsold copies came back, because they're kind of like, they tear the covers off them and they send them back to you. And it just feels so wasteful, And so we decided we were going to do this very, very differently. So I think that the reason we've had such good buy-in and such participation from the brands is because they understand how this is different and what that means to them. So for example, you might pay X number of dollars to put an ad in GQ or Esquire, and you're kind of attracted by those huge distribution numbers. But an enormous number of those are also pulped and sent back to the publisher. And you're paying a significant price for that space. But who knows who's buying that magazine? It could be somebody who's interested in style. It could be somebody who's interested in a particular columnist or the actor that's on the front cover. So it's not always watch enthusiasts that are getting a hold of that either. So the real distribution of your watch ad is very, very tiny by comparison. So I think that the cost is disproportionate to the real exposure. And here, the Calibrated Wrist will be delivered directly to an enthusiast. There will not be a single magazine that goes to waste. So, and then later we'll release it once a new version comes out. For example, in Toronto in the fall, we'll release a PDF version on the website, and that'll expose it to thousands and thousands of other people. So I'll get off my soapbox now. That's our project.
That's awesome.
Sounds awesome, man.
Thanks.
Yeah. When you told me about this project, Grant, I was just absolutely, I was floored. Like I love the vision. I think it makes a lot of sense, and I agree with you. It speaks directly to the audience. So I think there's a very, very strong alignment there. And obviously the brands are recognizing that as well as the, high quality output that you folks do at the Calibrated Wrist. So, well done. I look forward to kind of seeing that grow, over time as well. I'm sure it will continue to.
Thanks very much.
Oh, you're welcome.
Very cool. Before we get to Jason and talk about the timepiece shows and everything that he's doing, I want to talk about a project that I got involved with recently. So a few weeks ago, I had a severe toothache, and I couldn't work. So I'd lie down on the couch for a bit, and I was putzing on my phone, and I noticed that Google added Gemini on my cell phone. Didn't ask for it; it just happened to be there. So I was playing with the AI, and I asked it to design a dive watch. And it spit out a bunch of different pictures and some wonky designs and some weird names and lots of crowns, the cornet crown. And one of them actually looked pretty good. So I posted the ones that I like the best on Instagram just for fun. And I got a lot of interest from a lot of people on one specific one. In fact, our friend Andrew from Seal Instruments said, "I really like that. Let's make it." I thought he was joking. And he and I talked on direct messages and went back and forth, and we're going to make it. So basically the brand name, or not the brand name, but the model name that the AI came up with was Tremecs, Tremecs, which means nothing. And it's just some random string of letters that they put on the watch. And so we're going to be calling it Tremecs. And we've already started putzing with the design and making it a little different, and well, not different, but fine tuning it, right? Because the AI had added screws where no screws should be, and these kind of things. And Andrew and I actually made a contract, and we're really moving forward with this. And I wanted to make the name Tremecs mean something, so I tried to come up with an acronym for each letter, right? And it was whatever I came up with was horrible. And then I thought of Gemini again. So I asked Gemini to come up with an acronym for it, and get this: Timepiece rated for extreme marine environments, calibrated for submersion.
Wow.
Wow.
Is that not amazing?
It is
That's
amazing.
perfect.
And you didn't even have to hire a marketing group to do that. That's incredible. That sounds good, actually. I like it.
I sent it to Andrew, and he said, "Oh man, we're out of a job." So anyway, here's the little details I'm going to share with you guys what we come up with. So the case will be made of grade 5 titanium. It's going to be 1,000 meters water resistant. Dimensions are going to be 40 millimeters in diameter, 10 millimeters thick. And it's got to have short lugs because if you saw it, it's kind of like an integrated, angled lug kind of thing. Swiss automatic movements. It's going to have a solid case back with the Canada-US flag on it. And hopefully, the timepiece rated for extreme marine environments, calibrated for submersion, maybe written in a circle around the flags. And we're going to use that extra crown. The design had an extra crown at 4 o'clock. It's sort of like a crown pusher kind of thing. And either it's going to be a bezel lock or an inner rehot rotation device. So you put a 12-hour rehot that you can actually use as a second time zone inside the watch. And the idea is either we do one or Andrew wants to do both. A bezel lock and, a screw for the rehot to turn. So, it's very ambitious. It's going to be the least expensive Seal Instruments watch that they've made so far. It's going to be the least polarizing also because, Seal Instruments watches are phenomenal and they're beyond engineered to nth degree, but they are polarizing. It's a design that you either you really love or and they're also very large. This is going to be much more subdued at 40 millimeters. Again, 10 millimeters thick and 1,000 meters water resistance. So they really want to push the envelope of what their capabilities are and want to show people what they can do. And they're going to document everything on video. Wow. So we're going to be doing the CAD designs on video, the prototypes on video, the cases. Everything's going to be shown from A to Z, the whole process on Instagram and on both our feeds. And we're going to share it with everyone. We're very, very excited about this. In fact, Andrew sent me a message. He said his wife hadn't seen him this excited about a project in years. So this is going to be a lot of fun. And we hope that people follow it. I think it should do well.
Has Andrew talked about like how long that would take to come just to get to that sort of end product, or has that come up in conversation?
It's going to be weeks to get a prototypes done. He's in the middle. His new Exos driver just came out, and he's in the middle of fulfilling the commitments he's already has. Mm-hmm. So that's going to take a few weeks to finish up, and then we're going to get started on prototypes and so forth. It's going to take the time it takes, I guess. I don't think there's a plan as far as timeline wise. His core business obviously takes precedent over this project, but we will definitely be keeping people up to date on what's going on.
That's incredible, man. I was blown away when I started seeing you guys talking about this on Instagram. So that's amazing.
He asked me to, and we're going to call it a challenge, the AI challenge, right? Can we make the watch AI spit out? And I honestly think it looked pretty good as it was. I think that we can make it look even better. And there's a lot of little details I left out that we talked about that are going to be pretty.
When I first saw Andrew's comment on your post, I knew right away that this was going to happen because he's not the sort of guy who makes jokes like that. I think he saw that. No. He saw that as a gauntlet and he picked it up and he's running with it. It's fantastic.
That's exactly the metaphor I used. The gauntlet. He is that kind of guy. He does, though, like to mess around, and you guys don't want to see our DMs. But he's a great guy and he's a good friend. And I'm so excited about doing this. Jason, you made your vision of watches a reality. I know a lot of people have. It's been not a dream of mine, but it's something I've always wanted to do. And to be able to do that with an American manufacturer that's going to make things out of titanium from scratch, this is going to be spectacular. I just can't wait.
What incredible news, Mark. And like I said, I've talked with Andrew a number of times as well. And his attention to detail and his meticulousness towards design and little elements and everything else. It's absolutely phenomenal. And I remember he was chatting before, and one of the story that sticks in my mind is, the level of tolerances and the attention to detail is beyond anything I've experienced before. And I remember he hired a young guy to come in and kind of work with him, and his entire job was he was to manufacture these micro screws because what he was getting from the outside market was not sufficient for his level of quality that he wanted. So all he did was, with this young guy, was work with how to design a process to make these micro screws for one little element of his watch. And he's so particular. He's an incredible individual. I have no doubt that what's going to be produced is going to be beyond exceptional once it actually gets to market.
Thank you. We had a conference call 2 weeks ago, 2 weeks ago, and we were going line by line of like each of us had our wants, and we were aligned almost straight down the middle. And the bullet points on our agreement, there's so many bullet points of little details that we came up with that we want to get done. So cool. I'm so happy with this. Beyond thrilled. All right. So, Jason, you're up. What are you working on lately?
Oh, boy. There's never a shortage. I'll start off with kind of the basics of where we're at. Of course, the Timepiece shows, take a lot of time. The Vancouver show is pretty much sold out right now. We have one remaining table with a number of brands interested, so I'm sure we'll sell that. We'll probably have about 55 or 56 brands by the time all is said and done for Vancouver. Ticket sales continue to go at a really brisk pace. We've issued almost 2,000 tickets already, with still a couple of months to go. So the show is going to be very, very popular. I'm super excited. It's such a beautiful venue for Vancouver as well. And we've got some absolutely tremendous brands coming on board. There's been a number of other exciting things happening as well. For the Toronto show, which is happening September 19th to 21st, 2025. We've booked a new venue. It's the Meridian Arts Center, which is actually a very large live theater complex. And it's got an incredible upper level, lower lobby, which is where the majority of the exhibitors will be. But the capacity and the facilities that are available in that venue are just spectacular. I mean, I was very happy with Courtyard Marriott last year, but this is a whole other level up. We'll probably have, I'm anticipating about 85 to 90 exhibitors by show date come September. And it's just, the venue is absolutely beautiful. For anybody that went to the first show, and when they come to this, be prepared for a whole other level of experience. This is going to be top tier in every single way. And the brands are already very, very excited. So I'm just about to start the opening process for registrations for brands. So that's happening. One of the things as well that I love about the venue, because it's a live theater venue, there's a number of large auditoriums that are tied into the building. So unlike Toronto last year, where we had one room, small room, basically for live presentations on Saturday, we are going to be able to offer live presentations throughout the weekend on Saturday and Sunday. And it's a 550 seat theater that we're using. It's absolutely spectacular. So we're going to work hard on getting some very special guests and some great talks coming in throughout the weekend. And the other project that's going on concurrently, in addition to the Toronto show, it's happening at the same time, but it's being run independent, is we're actually putting together an amazing juried awards program. And I know you folks, I've talked with you all about this a little bit. We're going to hold it in the theater on the Saturday evening, but it's going to be a full gala red carpet event. We have some incredible jury members, people well known globally in the watch industry who are part of the jury. We'll have a large committee. Even the awards that we're getting done up, it's the same group that makes the Golden Globes and the Emmys and the Junos for the Canadians listening. So it's going to be a pretty special award. And we've actually confirmed Colin Mockery from Whose Line Is It Anyway? Most people will know that. He's actually confirmed as the host for the evening, and we'll live stream it. So it's going to be a really, really big gala event. So, and again, this is operating independent of the show, though. You don't need to be exhibiting at the show to be taking part in the awards ceremony, and many more details come with that. But I'm super excited about that. I think it's going to bring in an entirely additional or greater audience into the show or Toronto for the weekend that's happening. So I'm super excited with that. There's lots of other stuff too, but those are the big projects that I'm working on right now.
Is there an award for best podcast?
That's we've already won that.
Yeah, you guys are winners already. So actually, it's very interesting because as we're putting together the award categories, I'm still finalizing some of the components. Obviously, it's similar to like GPHG or LVMH awards. The focus is on the actual timepieces themselves. But one thing that's not really done within the industry, and I'd like to change that with these awards, is recognition of individuals and their contribution to the watch community or watch industry as a whole. Again, we'll probably have a mixture of, recognition of outstanding, exceptional achievements in terms of the actual timepieces or timepiece making. But also I'd like to recognize individuals within the community who are really contributing something special. And, this will probably be driven by the committee and jury members. Although I'm organizing it and helping to, run it all. I'm not part of the committee or jury at all. I really wanted to bring in, people who've had extensive experience in the timepiece industry and can really contribute something in terms of the judging that takes place. It's going to be a very transparent process. I'm very, very excited for the awards. I think it's going to be a lot of fun. It's something that I thought about doing last year, starting it off, but I just had so much on my plate doing the first show. I kind of said, I'll be too crazy to do this. I think I'm still a little crazy right now even to do this, but it's all coming together. We're super excited. Everyone I've spoken to about it is like just so ecstatic about it. And I think it's going to be an incredible, adjunctive activity that's going on in addition to the show as well. So between those two things, Toronto, September 19th to 21, everyone's got to come out here, whether you're from Toronto. And I think there'll be a lot more international visitors than there were the previous year for Toronto, especially with the awards program going.
Speaking of Toronto, you had mentioned you had sold 2,000 tickets so far for Vancouver. How many tickets did you sell for Toronto last year?
Toronto, we had about just over 2,000 people come through the show. We had issued tickets starting from like a year and 2 months out. So we had a smaller percentage of people who actually came. We issued about 3,500 tickets, and we had about, 2,000 actually came through the doors. I anticipate with Vancouver, those could be much higher because I didn't start issuing tickets until only maybe 4 or 5 months before the show. I was so excited last year. I just wanted to set up everything for Toronto immediately. So, I was advertising the show and people were registering for tickets a year and 1 month out. So, I think that's a bit too long. People forget, people's priorities change. They get scheduling conflicts, different things like that. So, timelines are going to be a little tighter, but I anticipate we should have around the same crowds in Vancouver. In terms of crowds for Toronto next year, we're going to have over 4,000 people for sure come to the show. I think it'll be a lot more than that, actually. And the wonderful thing about the venue is because it's so large, we have the capacity to expand and grow. So, we may even have larger numbers than that. And there's going to be a lot of advertising and different things that are going on to help promote the show. So I'm super, super excited about Toronto next year. So it's actually funny because
this year,
this year, I say next year, but it's this year. It's the time horizon that I operate on tends to be quite a bit farther out. So even though, Vancouver is still 2 months out, my daily activity now is probably 10% of my activities, Vancouver activities at this point. It's all switching to Toronto and the awards and the other elements that I'm doing. Even like last year, before I actually even ran the Toronto show, I had already booked the venue for next year for Toronto because I knew based on the response that I would need a larger venue. So it's always a bit scary when you do that because you're like, I felt like the show would go well, but I already committed to doing the show already for the following year before the Toronto show even occurred, right? And it was the same thing with Vancouver as well. I had booked the venue even before the Toronto show occurred. So, because usually it's about a year to year and 2 months that I operate on in terms of finding a venue and booking the space and from a planning standpoint, just to make sure everything's lined up.
Yeah, just like Field of Dreams, if you build it, they will come.
And they do. It's a lot of work to get them to come, though. But it's but I love it. And you know what? It's support from folks like the three of you and lots of other people that are just too numerous to mention. This is what made the Toronto show very special, in my opinion. Everybody was talking about it. The community here is very strong, as you know. There's a lot of people spreading the word and spreading the love about the show, and it made a difference. And for me, when I design these shows, I'm first and foremost is always the experience that people have, both brands who are attending the show, but also too, people who are, coming in as attendees as well. I want the experience to be incredible for them. So this is something that I've continued to work on to try and improve.
So you mentioned that the Toronto show will be at an art house theater kind of environment. Does that mean that all of the exhibitors have to perform their spiel for their watches and stuff. They have to dance and sing.
I did consider that, kind of like a vaudeville routine or something.
Exactly.
And,
I think Mike Pearson would be up for that.
you know what? Knowing Mike, he would be. So actually, the venue itself is very, there's a lot of incredible shows that take place there. And what I'm most excited about is just the atmosphere within the show. But I think the big opportunity that this venue really provides is with the larger venues in terms of auditoriums and whatnot. I think there's a lot more opportunity for engagement with, brands and different guests that come in and speak within the watch industry. And so I'm definitely going to lean into that as part of the show. So we're very excited about that. We'll probably have some of our folks come up and like the Grey NATO, who've been, very great supporters from a media standpoint. Time to Calibrate as well. You folks have been tremendously supportive. So yeah, maybe we can explore figuring out, get you guys up on stage in front of some audience, and you're building a fan base. So by the time, September comes, I think you'll be able to fill that auditorium, no problem.
You know that Bob is a classically trained dancer, right?
I've seen the outfits. It was a little disturbing. I asked him. He actually wore it today, and I asked him to change when I came in because it was just that pink, sequined outfit. I guess it was too much.
It's the rhinestones. I'm sure that's what was bothering me.
It was those hanging tassels that threw me off.
It was the back in my early 20s, my days in the Chippendales in Vegas. You call that classically trained?
Bob has lots of talents. He's a drummer. He has good taste in outfits. There's all sorts of things.
Boy.
Oh, boy, that's hilarious.
Now, there's an image I will never get out of my head.
Yeah, it's burned into my brain. I've gone through a traumatic experience, so I'm trying to share it a little bit just to make life a little easier.
Oh, well, now that we've gotten out of the way the projects we're all working on, I thought we'd have a little fun and address some of our horological pet peeves and maybe some hot takes that we might have on our industry. This should be fun. Brent, how about you go first up of these? What are your pet peeves and hot takes?
Yeah, sure. I'll start with my pet peeves, and then I'll follow up with hot takes. And it's funny, I'll let some of you guys know I did talk to Mark before today began, and I said, what's the difference between these two things? So I think I have it down now. Now, I don't want to pull the plug on anybody else's pet peeves here this morning, but my number one pet peeve is taking watches too seriously. I know this sounds counterintuitive for someone who runs a watch media business, but frankly, watches are just watches at the end of the day. Cars are just cars. And these products are meant to be functional and beautiful and bring us a modicum of joy and entertainment. In fact, I prefer the French word divertissement here. It means entertainment, but it also implies the word distraction. And these things should divert us from life's unpleasantness. So if they're eliciting disproportionate anger or frustration, then there's a problem. So I don't care if somebody wears a dive watch on leather. In fact, I love it as a general rule. And whether or not a date wheel matches the dial, I take case by case, but it would never elicit my ire. That being said, there are a few things that can sink a watch for me, and I wouldn't want to spend my money on them. I don't know if it's a peeve per se, but for example, a bad bezel action such as significant backplay or misalignment tells me that QC isn't what it should be. This is especially the case with an internal rotating bezel, because the moment you unscrew it, you don't want it to go into free fall or conversely have issues as you tighten down the crown anew. And watches, they're tools, so they should function accordingly. Another thing for me is lug to lug length and the manner in which a bracelet or a strap drapes around the wrist. I have a very flat kind of oblong wrist, and in order for a watch to fit or feel comfortable, the drape has to be just right. But is that a watch peeve or is it a peeve about my own anatomy? I'm not sure. So as an example, I have a Yema Superman that from an aesthetic standpoint, I absolutely love this watch.
I know exactly what you're talking about.
But I bought it online and I didn't have the opportunity to try it in advance. So with the exception of a NATO strap, I can't really get the right fit for it. So this leads me to kind of my final pet peeve, and it has to do with lug width. And even here, I'm not sure it's a watchmaking problem so much as a third-party strap making issue. So wonky widths like 19 millimeters or 21 millimeters are quite limiting, obviously, when it comes to third-party strap choices. My ZENEA, for example, is 19, and then my Aquastar Deep Star 39 is 21. And what I notice about both is that no matter how much I love them, their wrist time is limited as a result. So from an engineering and an aesthetic angle, I can understand why a watch company chooses those oddball lengths, but perhaps we could get strap makers to up their game a little bit. So those would be my peeps. My hot takes, on the other hand, I'm going to drop some stats here a little bit. So Tudor last year experienced a 34% drop in sales. That's enormous when you think about it. And it's enormous when you think about what Tudor is to the watch enthusiast sphere. And those figures come right out of like Morgan Stanley. So I think it's pretty accurate. On the other hand, Rolex increased by about 5%, and you have brands like Patek and Audemars and Cartier that did kind of the same thing. So this tells me two things. One, rich people will always be rich people, and they shop according to their desires and not according to the market. So it's going to be these mid-range brands that are going to suffer the most. If we take a look at Omega and some of the Swatch groups, they also had a kind of modest decline of about 10%. So here's my kind of hot take about that, I guess. And that's that these brands like Tudor and Omega are maybe relying too much on existing models, like the Black Bay and the Pelagos for Tudor, for example. Last year, they had a pretty big misfire on the Black Bay 58 GMT. And although I know, Mark, for example, the gilt was a big issue with you, I kind of liked it, but I know that is not what enthusiasts were looking for. Here's an even bigger hot take for me, and that's that I don't like the Pelagos FXD GMT very much. And I know that some people do, but for me, I'm not a fan of the snowflake hands to begin with. When you pair that with sort of the block markers and then add in that GMT bezel with the large numerals, I just find it busy and heavy at the same time. And so you have these brands that are kind of doubling down on these existing models and trying to iterate on them because they had success in the past. And so I feel a little bit like that's an issue. And even though I consider myself an Omega guy, for example, I look at the price jump, and we see this in other brands like IWC, but they don't seem in step really with an increase in quality or innovation. And I'm thinking specifically about like the black lacquer Aquaterra, for example, which I think is beautiful, by the way, but it's kind of oddly priced even within Omega's own catalog. And the comfort adjusting clasp, it feels a little like an afterthought, especially if you consider brands like Tremecs and ZENEA, who are doing a great job in that department. And while I love the first Omega in space, I can't really get behind the white dial Speedy. And even though it's my darling in the stable, the Seamaster, it feels like they're kind of like throwing stuff against the wall and hoping that something sticks there. I do like the black dial steel on steel, but it's jumped $1,000 in price, Canadian anyway, since last year. And the bronze wool models are pushing $15K Canadian.
Yeah, it's ridiculous.
And you know, that Silver Surfer model, it kind of leaves me indifferent at best. And then maybe at worst, it kind of feels like a Yachtmaster wannabe. So I know that people used to criticize brands like Hamilton and Tissot for the number of SKUs that they had, but I'm a little worried that brands like Omega are headed in that wrong direction as well. This is where I think brands like Longines and Rado have actually done really well. They've kind of consolidated and renewed their collections. If you take a look at the Spirit collection, for example, from Longines, 7 years ago, it didn't even exist. And even though it looks like a heritage model, it's a brand new collection. And people don't walk into ADs and ask for Longines anymore. They literally walk into ADs and say, hey, do you have the Zulu type? You know, so those are definitely great successes. So I think that all this rambling to say that Tudor and Omega need home runs this year. We'll find out about Tudor in a month's time. With the way things work with Swatch, it might take us a little longer to learn what Omega's going to do for the year. But I don't think anybody's going to grow like they did in 2023. What I think would be a success is that they hold the line at this point.
I agree. Tudor needs to do much better than last year. They need a home run, like a P01, sure. Something very different. You're 100% right. Bob, how about you?
So for me, I was going to say something kind of along the lines of Brent when it comes to people taking watches a little too seriously. Some of my favorite watches actually when I'm doing the videos and stuff is the weird ones, like a brand like Adawak, those types. A watch that I would never buy myself, but I enjoy those types of watches where they're just kind of out there, you know.
Argonaut.
Yeah, exactly. Yep, that's another one. There's a lot of brands like that. I absolutely love brands that sort of take a chance with their designs, like that. As far as actual pet peeves with watches, I am not a fan at all of uneven loom. If the hands are brighter than the markers, if it's going to be like that, I'd rather have no loom at all. Another one is deployant clasps, and with all the integrated bracelet watches lately, a lot of them have those. Just the lack of micro adjust. I don't know if you guys have the same, but my wrist really does swell quite a bit and shrink throughout the day, so that's an issue for me. Although I just had Christopher Ward's 12, the 38 millimeter 12 on, and they have a really cool on the fly adjustment clasp for their deployant clasp, so that's nice. Not too many brands in that price point offer that in a deployant clasp. But as far as hot takes, I think I may have misread this question a little bit when you were sending this over, Mark.
You don't want to see the pictures, Bob. It's currently on the desk right now.
Is it more rhinestone
Really
outfits?
disturbing.
Yeah. That's what he meant by hot?
Yeah. But the one thing that kind of, it's sort of fun at first, but then it gets real old and it's about to start happening is the Rolex predictions.
Oh yeah.
There's all kinds of fun ones and there's cool ones. The White Explorer that people are mocking up and have for a few years now. But nothing ever happens all that exciting in the end. So it's a lot of hype for nothing. And I think it overshadows, like there's so many cool releases at that time that you maybe don't discover for a few days or even weeks afterwards because there's so much hype around Rolex. And I'm not a Rolex hater. I like the brand. But them and Tudor as well, they receive a lot of hype. A lot of stuff gets sort of swept under the table to be discovered later, I find. But yeah, I think that would be just about it for me. What about you, Jason?
Hold on, Jason, 1 second. Bob,
Sure.
Did you see the we were talking about Rolex, people conjuring up images of what they could possibly be.
Yeah.
Some guy had made a new Milgauss in the shape and form of the new Air King.
No, I have not seen
with
that.
the crown guards
I'll have to check
on it,
that out.
and
That's
it
cool.
looked really good. I'll try to dig it up. I'll send it to you later.
Okay, cool.
But
yeah,
I hope that fits me.
it won't.
No, it won't.
It will not.
Yeah.
Sorry, Jason. Go ahead.
I don't want to usurp Jason's time too much more here either, but like there is something I want to touch on that you said, Bob, and that's about like how much oxygen gets taken up by Rolex or even Tudor for that matter, because one of my favorite things about going to Geneva during that first week of April, and I think Jason would agree with this, is that there's a lot more going on at Time to Watches and at the Beau Rivage than there is really going on at Watches and Wonders. Watches and Wonders is like usually an iteration on something that has already existed, whereas you find some really cool stuff at those smaller shows. And that's, to me, that's where I'm going to spend the majority of my time when I'm there this year. So yeah, very cool commentary.
And actually, that's a good point because I was you did a great coverage, and I learned a lot about releases that nobody else was talking about at all through the Calibrated Wrist. So that was awesome, and looking forward to that again this year.
That's what made the Moonswatch release so cool. It overshadowed everything that everybody else was doing, like just weeks before. Yeah, very cool. Okay, Jason, this is all you. Go ahead.
Yeah. So, anyways, I agree with you with the amount of coverage on Rolex and everybody speculating about what's going to happen. And at the end of the day, usually what comes out is so minimalist in terms of changes. It's almost like, when a new iPhone comes out, right? And everybody's going crazy over one little button change. And it's like talking like it's revolutionary. I'm sorry, it's not. It's just a little evolution. There's so much more exciting things happening with other brands that I personally love. And, it is more deserving of airtime, I think, generally. Yeah, and getting into, in terms of pet peeves, my experience generally in the watch world and watch enthusiast community and industry, it's so overwhelmingly positive. I don't have a lot in the way of peeves. Similar to what I think almost everybody has mentioned, though, to a certain extent. Mine falls into the category of people that take things a little too seriously, and every once in a while you talk with someone and they don't really know watches per se, but they have a nice watch on their wrist, but they just wear it because of status, or they don't even appreciate what it is. And I find that a little unselling. I don't really like it very much, because if someone's going to invest their time and energy and money into something, you don't have to know everything about it, but at least kind of appreciate it for what it is. And some people just have no appreciation. So that rubs me a little bit the wrong way. In terms of hot takes, I'll share with you, and I feel very strongly about this. Not everybody agrees with me. And some of it comes into, how you define things. But for me, the term microbrand, I absolutely cannot stand that term. I think it's a disservice to so many brands to be called a microbrand. I prefer the term independent brand. Now, independent brands, typically a lot of people view that as somebody who makes a much higher end or premium timepiece. It's a custom made movement. It's a lot of other elements, but I don't think anybody starts a watch brand with the vision of, I want to be micro, I want to be tiny and never ever grow, never become more substantial. So I really like using the term independent brands much more so. And you can be a small independent brand, or you can be a larger independent brand, but I really would like to see that term catch on and micro brand really disappear over time, because I think it's viewed it can be viewed by some in a very negative way. And so I love the term independent brand. And there's different levels of independent brand too. Some people will take much more control of the entire process. Other people will be more of I don't want to call it a catalog watch, but there are some like that as well. They're all independent brands. And they're either smaller or larger or somewhere in between. So that's kind of my take from a vernacular standpoint. I'll use micro brands sometimes, but I really try and stay away from the term. And if you listen to me in interviews or other talks, and I really try and push the term independent brand, I rarely use the term micro brand. And that's a very conscious decision on my part.
Man, I actually started the show by insulting you then. I apologize for that.
I didn't even notice, but it's still used a lot. Like it's a common term, and I know I'm probably in the minority, but I know there's an audience of people that also feel the same way. And I just like the term independent brand. I think it's more, it's in a more appropriate term. And I think it's a more positive term when it's applied to somebody. Like I say, every company is different. They're small, they're large, but I just find the term micro kind of a weird concept. Like if somebody starts a restaurant and you don't say, oh, they own a micro restaurant. They own a restaurant, right?
They own a microbrewery.
There's microbrewery, but even then, I don't like it. It's craft brewery or independent brewery is a better term. I don't like microbrewery. Some microbreweries, like even local guys, I love microbrews, I love craft brews, and I love talking to the owners of them. And you talk to them, and some of them, they have a definition of what a microbrewery is, but the volumes are still absolutely massive. To me, that's a full-size business. You've got a business that's selling millions of dollars of beer per year. I don't think that's a micro business. That's a smaller business, but it's a significant business. Micro is just a term that doesn't make any sense to me. So independent is the word I like to use.
I do think it's a term that's been on the out for a number of years now, actually. I think that, when online watch brands surfaced, it seemed like the absolute perfect term to define them because they were one person, very small, but these things have evolved. And some of those early ones like Raven, et cetera, have grown into really well-established watchmaking businesses. So I agree entirely.
Absolutely. And from a design standpoint, you've got brands now which are assembling movements, whether they buy them third party and adopt them. You've got ones that are making unique case designs, which are unique only to them. Dial configurations in terms of construction, there are so many brands that are doing almost 100% unique items. It's not like a catalog watch. You've got a very thoughtful, well-crafted timepiece. Yet those still fall under the term microbrand. And I don't think it's appropriate. So I love independent horology. I love independent brands, and I will always call people that. And I slip sometimes too, because I've had it in my vernacular, but I try and avoid it because I don't think it's fair to the companies. There's a lot of work that goes into brands. So
now, as the guy who writes the micro brand digest for Worn and Wound, it's a term I also agree with should be called independent, but if you want to consider microbranding, if you do want to use that term, think of it as when the brand is not established yet, when it's just starting and hitting Kickstarter and hasn't gotten backers, and we're not even sure if it's going to be a brand yet. That's a microbrand. Once you've got a model that's established, it's being sold and it's being in production and people are buying it, this is no longer a microbrand. This is an independent brand. That's my take on that.
Yeah. Again, this is where the challenge comes in, because everybody's definition is a little bit different.
Yeah.
And, everyone will follow a slightly different definition as well. So don't worry, Mark, I still love you, even though you have microbrand in your title there. So
the thing is, Warner One just had this discussion on their podcast last week, the whole microbrand thing. They don't like it either. And independent's what it should be called. So I don't know if that column's going to change names or who knows.
I think, like Brent's comment, it is a term that I think is evolving away. So I think over time it will become less and less. But, my prediction is to say, well, how long will that term be around? It'll probably be around for another 10 or 15 years at least.
Yeah.
But I think it'll become less and less prevalent over time, especially as the, capabilities and the products that are being put out by newcomer brands continue to grow and improve. And, it's not going to be an apt title anymore for these new brands that are coming out.
All right. I guess it's my turn. I hope you guys are sitting down.
Uh-oh.
First of all,
how did I predict this? I don't know.
First of all, I am one of those guys who takes watches too seriously. No, that's not true. I don't take much very seriously, but I do study and I do, really look at details, and quality control is a huge pet peeve of mine. One of the things I hate the most is hand alignment. And I'm not talking about the hands hitting the hash marks. I'm talking about the hands hitting the right hash marks at the right time. If it's 7 o'clock and the hour hand is 10 minutes to 7, that's wrong. And a watch should never come out of the factory or go to a store or be sent to a customer with that problem. And that was my issue with my Hamilton. My Hamilton was about 10 minutes off on the hour hand. Drove me absolutely nuts. And I hadn't noticed at first, but once I did, couldn't unsee it. Another issue I have is, again, it has to do with alignment. I'm the kind of guy who likes to have the minute hand right on the hash mark. And if you can get a watch that does that on only half of the dial, or for some reason 15 minutes of the dial, for some reason the hash marks aren't in the right place, or the minute track and the applied markers are off, that drives me absolutely bonkers. I mean, this is, we're spending thousands of dollars sometimes on these watches, and for that to be that way is just completely wrong. Let's see here. Oh, and when you're aligning watches, again, getting the hands right in the right place. Some watches have a ton of backplay when you try to set them. So you go ahead of the minute, then you have to torque it back a little bit in order for it to hit. And sometimes that's not enough, and you got to do like 4, 5, 6, 7 times in order to get it right. That shouldn't be. My Tudor Black Bay Pro, it is rock solid. There's no play on the hands at all. It hits the markers every single time. I set it once and leave it alone, and it's perfect all around the dial. But there's another problem. Tudor has issues with end links. I've had several Black Bays. I've had Black Bay 41 with the diver version. I've had a blue Black Bay 41, the time only, no bezel, it's regular watch. I had a two-tone version of that. And I just had my Black Bay Pro. Every single one of them, the end links are too small to fit inside the links. They're just a slightly micron or whatever off, that they rattle between the lugs. And if you tap them on the watch, you can actually go ding, 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 ding with your watch when you're just tapping the end link. So I would take them off and I'd put a little tape, Scotch tape, a little clear tape on the actual case to fit the lug in nice and snug. I mean, Tudor's like, the Black Bay's now, I think $5,300 is the new retail. That's unacceptable. So those are a few of my hot takes, my pet peeves. Hot take, I hate NATO straps. I don't understand why anyone would buy a NATO strap and put a $10 piece of nylon or $5 piece of nylon on a $5,000 watch. I don't get that. And people complain, and I was going to say bad words. People like to comment on thickness of watches. So, okay, let's have a 12 millimeter watch or 10 millimeter watch. Hey, look how thin it is. Let's put it on NATO and make it 15 millimeters up off your wrist. Like, it's just, I don't get it. And there's always this extra material you got to fold and stick underneath the keeper. It's just wrong. And who thought that fixed bars on watches, I mean, I get it. If it's a military watch, like CWC, that's fine. Or, my aqua timer has fixed bars, but there's a clever way of clipping on a bracelet and everything else. Why limit yourself to just NATO straps or pass-through straps? I don't get that. I think that's stupid. If you want a nice strap, reach out to Aaron Bespoke and have a nice strap made for you. That's my hot take on that.
You're gonna have all the tool watch EDC guys after us, Mark. We're in trouble here.
I've already. I don't get it. Like, I just don't. I can't.
Mark, I'm going to send you a selection of NATO straps. just to make you go crazy.
I have a bunch. I've some watches I've owned have come with NATO straps. Yeah. I'll cut out the second loop just to make it a little thinner. I try to live with it. I'll cut the extra piece off and burn the end so it's nice and smooth. And like, I do a good job with it. It's stupid. Plus the buckle and the keepers are all the way on the left side of your wrist, and there's like nothing underneath your wrist. And your shirt gets caught up, your pants and you put in your pockets. It's all wrong. It's just
I'm not a fan of NATOs either. I've tried them a few times. I'll say they are comfortable to wear. They are for me, but they don't look super aesthetically pleasing. And I have a fairly small wrist at 6 3/4. So any NATO has so many like fold backs, and I'm trying to keep it all in one piece. It just looks ugly as hell. So I get it.
And how about that dumbass who's suing people for using the word NATO when selling NATO straps?
I saw that. That's ridiculous.
It's not just Adrian Barker. There's quite a few people that got NATO straps for less, I think, or whatever.
Oh, the name CSN. Of the brand. Yeah, CSN. CNS CNS literally changed their name because of that.
Yeah, because of this stupidity. I mean, come on.
Crazy.
Yeah.
All right, soapbox. I'm done. End of rant.
That's okay. That was less than I expected, Mark. But very balanced stuff.
And I talk really fast.
And I agree with you with the NATOs. I'm just not a fan. So I know some people love them, but I've never really understood it for me personally.
Well, I feel like I'm at AA here. I have to say my name is Brent Robiar and I like NATO straps, but
button straps is another thing. You have a button strap on today.
Yeah.
Talk about a bunch of extra material for nothing. I had a brand called Ancon years and years ago. It was a Southeast Asian brand. They had sent me a couple of watches that were made of two different bronzes. One was an aluminum bronze, one was a copper bronze. So it did, tarnish differently. One of them came on this massive, thick NATO button strap. And boy, it felt like I was wearing a saddle on my wrist. It was so huge. Yeah, I don't get that either. But okay, that's it. That's all I got as far as friends. So that's pretty much covers the show today. I hope to see as many people as possible at Timepiece shows this year. It's going to be a lot of fun. And, the Timepiece shows were an unknown entity at the time when Jason organized the first one. It's no longer that. People know how much fun we had. They know how the community behaved over there. It was just a tremendous time. I don't remember who I was talking to recently. I was saying that, I'm married, I have kids, and I usually do everything with my kids and my wife. We would go everywhere together. Going to a Timepiece show last year was the first time, and I don't know how long, that I had gone and done something for myself for an entire weekend. And boy, man, did we have fun. Between the show, the Grey NATO marathon event, coming back to the hotel and meeting up with Jason and Jose at the bar and just talking till like the wee hours, and the next on Sunday with more people. I mean, it just was, I can't wait. I just can't wait for the next one. And whoever's listening to this, you should just attend. It's a wonderful time.
This is what makes these shows wonderful. And there's so much activity and things going on outside of the shows as well. And it's just such an opportunity to connect with friends and people you've met online and people that but only online, and like-minded people. And it's really an amazing experience. And I'm just going to give a very quick plug as well. All of our Timepiece shows now are under a common brand. For last year, of course, it was TorontoTimepieceShow.com was how you get tickets. We've put everything into TimepieceShow.com. So this is where you have tickets for Vancouver. Eventually the tickets will be released for Toronto. as we expand, this is where all of the shows are going to be housed, basically. So you'll have all the information there. So, give us a follow on Instagram, of course, but also timepieceshow.com is where you can find tickets for Vancouver. So if you have any West Coast listeners there, Washington State, Oregon, BC, and you want to come to the show, there are still tickets available. Go to timepieceshow.com and you can register there.
Where else can they find you online, Jason?
Online, I'm probably most active through Instagram. So at Toronto Timepiece Show or at Vancouver Timepiece Show are the two most active accounts. So, reach out to me there. I'm very accessible for the most part. Sometimes I get pretty busy. So if I don't respond right away, just hang tight or send me a reminder, and I'm usually pretty good with getting back to people. So
very good. Since we're talking about extra shows and future stuff, our lineup is pretty stacked for the next couple of months. We've got Alexandre Voisin. He's the man behind many of the recent Longines hits, including the Spirit line. He's the head product manager for Longines. So he actually reached out to me on Instagram mentioning something. He said, I'm the one who designed it or something like that. And I didn't believe him. And then I looked up on LinkedIn and lo and behold, 11 years at Longines. So we're going to have him on. We've got Adam Craniotis, who's co-founder of Red Bar, going to come on. That's for March. In April, we've got Richard Page, not the founder of Time Zone, but the person who bought it from the people who originally owned it in Singapore. He has a brand called Page, Our Page, where he makes some Art Deco stuff. He's still very much active in the watch space. And then Andrew McCutcheon from Time and Tide has agreed to come on as well. So we've had the people from Warner Wound, we've had the people from Fratello, Block to Watch. So now Time and Tide is going to come on and talk about his story and his adventures and his new stores in London and so forth, and his adventure into New York, hopefully. So if you guys have any other questions or any of the guests who want to reach out to us, please comments, email us at timetocalibrate@gmail.com. We'd also love it if you could rate, review, subscribe on iTunes and Spotify or wherever you get your podcasts. Every little bit counts, and it helps our show reach more ear holes. Thank you for listening, and see you next time on the Time to Calibrate podcast.
Cheers, guys.
Cheers.
Cheers.